The silence in my mother's living room was always a heavy thing. It was not an absence of sound, but a presence, thick with the scent of lemon polish and old books, a silence that had absorbed 60 years of whispered conversations and unspoken expectations. I sat in my father's old armchair, the brown leather cool and familiar against my skin, while my mother, Olivia, poured tea from a silver pot that had been her mother's. The delicate clink of china against china was the only percussion in a room thrumming with tension. Kiana had taken the kids home an hour ago, pleading an early bedtime for Lily, and I had stayed, as I always did, for the weekly ritual. I knew why I had really stayed. I had to say the words. Moonlight streamed through the bay window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny ghosts. It caught the silver threads in my mother's meticulously styled hair, turning them to mercury. She moved with a grace that belied her age, each gesture precise and laden with meaning. She placed a cup of steaming Earl Grey on the small table beside me, her eyes avoiding mine. She knew, too. The conversation from dinner still hung between us, a specter at the feast. Kiana's polite deflection, my own nervous laughter when my mother had mentioned, again, how lovely a third child would be. "The gardenias are blooming early this year," Olivia said, her voice smooth as the silk of her dress. She sat opposite me on the floral sofa, back straight, ankles crossed. Mother Alina always said that was a sign of a fortunate summer. I took a slow breath, the warm, fragrant steam from the tea filling my lungs. "It is now, Marcus. You have to say it now." "Mother," I began, my voice softer than I intended. "About what you said at dinner." She looked at me then, and her eyes were not unkind, but they were unyielding, the pale blue of a winter sky. "It was only an observation, Marcus. Lily and Leo are such delights. Another would only multiply the joy in your house." She smiled, a careful, practiced curve of her lips. "A house needs the sound of children. It is what gives it a soul." This was her opening gambit, framing her desire as a universal truth, something as natural and inevitable as the blooming gardenias. I had to steer this back to our reality, to the life Kiana and I had consciously, lovingly built. "Kiana and I said, choosing each word with the care of a man diffusing a bomb, we are truly content. We feel our family is complete. With two, we can give them everything. Not just materially, but emotionally. We have the time, the energy, we are happy." The word happy seemed to hang in the air, a fragile bubble. Olivia's smile did not vanish, but it tightened at the corners. She took a slow sip of her tea, the cup barely making a sound as she returned it to the saucer. "Happy," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "Happiness is a fleeting thing, Marcus. It is not a foundation. Legacy is a foundation. Family is a foundation." I felt a familiar frustration begin to simmer in my chest. This was the old dance, the shifting of the goalposts. It was never just about happiness, it was always about something grander, heavier. "Our family is a legacy," I countered, trying to keep my voice even. "Lily and Leo are your grandchildren. They are our legacy, a vibrant, healthy, loved legacy." "Of course they are," she said, her tone dismissive, as if I had stated something obvious and slightly childish. She looked past me, her gaze focusing on the large, ornately framed portrait above the fireplace. It was a painting of her mother, Alina, a woman I had never met but whose presence was a constant in this house. In the portrait, Alina was young, her face serene but her eyes holding a deep, unmistakable sorrow. But a legacy must be sturdy. It must be able to withstand losses. There it was, the turn I had been dreading. She never spoke of the family history directly, not for years, but she always alluded to it, using it as a blunt instrument to shape the present. "Losses?" I asked, though I knew the story by heart. It was a foundational myth of our family, a tale of sorrow used to justify a lifetime of control. Olivia's eyes glistened in the lamplight. She was not crying, she never cried, but she could summon a theatrical sheen of tears at will, a skill honed over decades. "My mother," she began, her voice dropping to a reverent hush. "She carried 5 children. She held only 3 of us in her arms, 2 little angels gone before they could even take a breath." She shook her head slowly, her gaze fixed on the portrait. 2 tiny souls waiting for us in heaven. She bore that grief her entire life. She bore it with a strength I can only aspire to. She used to say that every child born into this family was a victory over the darkness that tried to claim us. I could feel the trap closing. Her narrative was airtight, emotionally bulletproof. To disagree was to dishonor the dead, to spit on the memory of those little angels. "Mother, I cannot," I started, but she cut me off, her voice gaining a new, sharp intensity. "You think it is about wanting more? About some grandmotherly whim?" She leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It is about honor, Marcus. It is about honoring the struggle of those who came before us. It is about ensuring that their loss was not in vain. Every child you bring into this world is a tribute to the children she lost. It is a defiance of the sorrow that haunted her. When I look at Lily, I see a victory. When I look at Leo, I see a victory. I want to see more victories, for her, for Alina." The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. The portrait of Alina seemed to loom larger, her sorrowful eyes now feeling accusatory. My mother had masterfully reframed my personal, practical decision about the size of my own family as an act of disrespect to my sainted grandmother. My contentment was now a betrayal. "Kiana and I have made our decision," I said, my voice firmer now, a defense against the tidal wave of guilt she was unleashing. "It is our life, our choice. It is not a reflection on grandmother Alina or on you. It is about what is right for us." Olivia's face hardened. The sheen of tears was gone, replaced by a cold, flinty resolve. "Choice," she said, and the word was a curse. "You speak of choice as if it exists in a vacuum. Your choices ripple through this family, Marcus, they always have." She paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. I thought of my rebellious youth, the years I spent trying to break free from this very room, this very pressure. She was reminding me that I had always been a disappointment in some way. "This is not just about you. It is about our name. It is about ensuring that we are not a family that shrinks from its duty, from its history." I stood up, unable to sit any longer. The weight of her expectations felt physical, a mantle of lead on my shoulders. "Our duty is to the children we have," I said, walking to the window and looking out at the moonlit garden. The gardenias she had mentioned glowed white in the darkness. "To love them, to protect them, to raise them to be good people, that is honor enough for any ancestor." I heard the soft rustle of her dress as she stood. I did not turn around. I could feel her presence behind me, a cold force. Her voice, when she spoke again, was barely a whisper, but it carried across the room with chilling clarity. "I had a dream last night," she said. "I dreamt of Mother Alina. She was in her garden, but it was not this garden. It was a vast, empty field, and she was all alone. She was calling out names, names I did not recognize." A shiver traced a path down my spine. She had never gone this far before. This was new territory, a darker, more manipulative gambit. I turned to face her. Her expression was unreadable, a mask of maternal concern etched with something else, something like triumph. "What are you saying, Mother?" She took a step closer, her eyes locking with mine. "I am saying that the past is not always quiet, Marcus. And sometimes, the choices we make in the present, they have echoes we cannot possibly foresee." She let the silence stretch, letting her insinuation take root in the fertile soil of my anxiety. "Think about it. That is all I ask. Just think about what it truly means to be a part of this family." She did not wait for a reply. She turned and walked slowly, gracefully from the room, leaving me alone in the silence with the portrait of Alina and the terrifying, unspoken question hanging in the air. What had she really meant by those unrecognized names? The silence that had settled over the dinner table was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating quiet of a gathering storm. The clink of my fork against the fine china plate sounded like a gunshot in the tense atmosphere. I could feel my mother's eyes on me, a laser of disapproval burning into the side of my face. Every time I glanced at Kiana, I saw the rigid set of her jaw, the way her knuckles were white as she gripped her water glass. She had been building a fortress around herself all evening, brick by brick, and I knew it would not take much for the walls to be breached. It was my mother who launched the first missile. She placed her own fork down with a deliberate, quiet finality. "Marcus," she began, her voice deceptively smooth, like polished ice. "Your father and I were discussing the annual charity gala. It is in 6 weeks. We think it would be the perfect occasion for you to make a formal appearance. To show a united front, it is important for the family image." I felt a cold dread trickle down my spine. The gala. It was not just a party, it was a stage, a place where I was expected to perform the role of the perfect heir. I opened my mouth to form some weak objection, but Kiana spoke first. Her voice was low, but it cut through the air with startling clarity. "Marcus and I will not be attending," she said. She did not look at my mother. She kept her gaze fixed on the centerpiece, a sterile arrangement of white orchids. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My mother's smile was a thin, dangerous line. "I do not believe I was speaking to you, Kiana. This is a family matter." "I am his wife," Kiana replied, her voice gaining a fraction of steel. "That makes it my matter." "Does it?" My mother's tone was laced with venomous sweetness. "You have made it abundantly clear where your loyalties lie, and it is not with this family. It is with that foundation of yours. A project you seem to value more than your duties here." "The foundation is my duty," Kiana shot back, finally turning to face her. "It is the work I choose to do. It is something that matters. Something that matters more than continuing our legacy." My mother's voice began to rise, shedding its polite veneer. "More than providing an heir, you have been married for 3 years, Kiana, 3 years, and you have done nothing but distract my son from his responsibilities. You have filled his head with these philanthropic fantasies." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, hot and familiar. "Mother, that is not fair. The foundation is important work. It is not a fantasy." "Do not defend her, Marcus," she snapped, her composure shattering. She turned her full fury back to Kiana. You knew what you were marrying into, you knew the expectations, and yet you have systematically isolated him. You have turned him against his own flesh and blood. Is that not enough for you? Do you have to sever the family line completely?" The accusation hung in the air, ugly and brutal. Sever the family line. The words were a physical blow. I saw Kiana flinch, but then she straightened her shoulders, a soldier preparing for a final stand. "Is that what this is really about?" Kiana's voice was trembling, but not with fear, with a rage I had never heard from her before. "An heir? A baby to carry on the great Harrison name? I am not a broodmare, Olivia, and Marcus is not a stallion for you to breed." "How dare you?" My mother stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You speak of this family with such contempt. We took you in. We gave you a life you could never have dreamed of." "You gave me a cage," Kiana shouted, rising to her feet as well. The dam had broken. "You gave me a beautifully gilded cage with rules for every breath I take. You schedule our lives, you dictate our friends, you try to dictate when we have a child. You have not taken me in, you have annexed me. And him?" She pointed a finger at me, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. "You have suffocated him his entire life. Do you have any idea what that pressure is like? To have every choice, every dream, every moment weighed against the family image. To know that your only value is your last name." My father tried to interject. "Ladies, please, this is not the time or the place." But there was no stopping it now. The truth was erupting, violent and messy. "I have given him autonomy," my mother cried, her face a mask of fury and hurt. "I have given him everything." "You have given him nothing," Kiana's voice cracked. "You have given him a script and punished him whenever he dared to improvise. You do not want a son, you want a puppet. And I will not let you use me as another string to control him with. The decision about children is ours, only ours. It is not a topic for your boardroom discussions. It is our life." "Your life," my mother laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Your life is a gift from this family, and your little foundation, your precious life's work, it is funded by the very legacy you claim to despise. It is hypocrisy, plain and simple. You are happy to take the money, but you refuse to pay the price." That was the deepest cut. I saw Kiana's confidence waver for a second. She knew the foundation's funding was a sensitive subject, a point of leverage my parents held over us. But she recovered quickly, her defiance burning brighter. "The price is too high," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. "The price is our souls. The price is a child brought into this world not out of love, but out of obligation to be another piece on your chessboard. I will not do that. I will not bring a child into this emotional warfare." The room went silent again, but this silence was different. It was the silence after a bomb has detonated, a ringing, hollow emptiness. My mother stared at Kiana, and for the first time I saw not just anger in her eyes, but a genuine, chilling hatred. She had lost control of the narrative, and she knew it. She turned to me, her eyes pleading, demanding, "Marcus, are you going to let her speak to me this way? Are you going to let her destroy this family?" All the arguments, all the years of suppressed frustration, the feeling of being a ghost in my own life, it all rose up in my throat. I looked at my mother, at her expectant face, waiting for me to fall in line, to discipline my wife, to restore order. I looked at Kiana, standing alone, brave and terrified, fighting a battle for both of us. And I made a choice. The words came out not as a shout, but as a raw, guttural explosion of sound, filled with a lifetime of pent-up anguish. Get out. The words hung in the air, stark and unbelievable. My mother blinked as if she had not heard me correctly. What did you say? I took a step forward, my entire body trembling. I said get out of our house, now. The shock on her face was absolute. It was as if I had physically struck her. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. My father stood up, his face pale. Marcus, you do not mean that. I have never meant anything more in my entire life, I said, my voice low and shaking with the effort to control it. Leave, please. For a long moment, no one moved. The world had stopped. Then, with a dignity that was more terrifying than any outburst, my mother picked up her purse. She looked at me, and the betrayal in her eyes was so profound it felt like a physical wound. Very well, she whispered. She turned and walked out of the dining room, my father following close behind, casting a helpless, disappointed look over his shoulder at me. The front door clicked shut. The sound was soft, but it echoed through the house like a thunderclap. The silence that followed was deafening. Kiana was still standing, her body rigid. I stood there, my breath coming in ragged gasps, adrenaline coursing through me. I had done it. I had finally drawn a line. I turned to Kiana, expecting to see relief, gratitude, something, but her face was ashen. She was staring at the closed door, her eyes wide with something that looked an awful lot like fear. Marcus, she whispered, her voice barely audible, what have we done? And in the cold, sobering quiet after the storm, I realized I did not have an answer. I had just declared war on my own family, and I had no idea what the consequences would be. The victory felt hollow, and the future felt terrifyingly, utterly unknown. The rain had started as a fine mist and escalated into a steady, gray downpour that mirrored the weather inside my soul. It was a pathetic fallacy my mother would have appreciated. I stood on the sidewalk opposite Marcus and Kiana's brownstone, the familiar warm glow of their porch light a beacon I felt entirely unworthy of approaching. It had been 2 weeks since the disastrous dinner. 2 weeks of silence, 2 weeks of my own company, 2 weeks of reading and rereading the letter until the paper felt soft as cloth at the creases. My umbrella was a useless shield against the real storm. I was not here to apologize. An apology felt like a small, tidy box in which to place a mess that was oceanic in its depth. I am sorry I pressured you, or I regret my words. They were true, but they were insufficient. They were branches, not roots. I had to show them the roots, the gnarled, tangled system that had fed my bitterness. I had to show them my mother's letter. My hand, clenched around the envelope in my coat pocket, was numb with cold. The other trembled as I finally willed my legs to move, crossing the street as if walking to my own sentencing. Each step up the brick path to their front door was a monumental effort. The cheerful little garden gnome Kiana had placed by the steps seemed to judge me with its painted, smug smile. I raised a hand to ring the bell, then lowered it. I took a shaky breath, the air cold in my lungs. What if they turned me away? What if my son looked at me with that same wall of disappointment? That would shatter what little resolve I had left. I rang the bell. The chime echoed inside, a cheerful sound that felt like a mockery. I could hear footsteps, and my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The door opened, and it was Kiana. She was wearing one of Marcus's old college sweatshirts, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She did not look angry, merely surprised, and then cautiously guarded. Olivia, she said, her voice neutral. Hello. Kiana, my own voice was thin, reedy. Is Marcus home? I need to speak with both of you. It will not take long. She studied my face for a moment, and I saw a flicker of concern break through her reserve. I must have looked a sight, pale, rain-streaked, my eyes undoubtedly red-rimmed from a day of crying. He is in the living room, she said, stepping back to allow me in. Come in, you are soaked. The warmth of their home was a physical shock. The scent of garlic and herbs from a recent meal hung in the air, a smell of a life lived fully, a life from which I had exiled myself. I stood awkwardly on the welcome mat, dripping onto the floor, as Kiana closed the door. "Mom," Marcus's voice called from the other room. He appeared in the hallway, a book in his hand. When he saw me, his expression hardened slightly, his posture stiffening. "What is this about?" "I have something I need to show you," I said, my hand going back to the envelope in my pocket. "Something I only just found. It explains a great deal. About me, about my mother, about everything." I saw the skepticism in his eyes, a shield he had erected against me. Kiana placed a hand on his arm, a silent communication passing between them. "Let us go sit down," she said gently, her diplomacy a balm on the tense air. We moved into the living room. I took the armchair, perching on the edge as if ready to flee. They sat together on the sofa, a united front. The space between us felt like a canyon. I looked at my son's face, the familiar set of his jaw that was so like his father's, and the unfamiliar distance in his eyes. This was the moment. There was no turning back. I withdrew the letter. The paper seemed to glow in the soft lamplight. "After my mother died," I began, my voice trembling, "I was going through her things. I found this. I did not read it until today. I was not ready." I took a shuddering breath. "It is from my mother to me. Written just before she passed. I thought I knew her. I thought I knew her disappointment in me, her constant judgment about my career, about our small family. I built my entire life in part as a reaction to what I believed she wanted from me, which was everything I was not." I unfolded the letter, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "I need to read some of it to you," I said, my eyes pleading with them to understand. "Not to excuse my behavior, there is no excuse, but perhaps to explain it." I began to read, my voice gaining a little strength as I navigated my mother's elegant script. "My dearest Olivia asterisk. The doctor has left and the room is quiet. There is a peace in knowing the end is near, a strange clarity. I find my thoughts turning to you, as they always do, and I am filled with a regret so profound I can scarcely breathe with the weight of it. I have been a foolish, prideful woman. I watched you build your life, your brilliant career, your beautiful family with David, your wonderful son, and I was in awe. You were everything I never had the courage to be, independent, successful, fiercely yourself, and I was jealous. Terribly, shamefully jealous. My life was defined by my role as a wife and mother. When your father died, that role shrunk and I felt myself shrinking with it. I saw you living so fully and I felt obsolete, forgotten. So I did a terrible thing. I criticized, I nitpicked. I spoke of grandchildren not because I truly yearned for them, but because it was the one area where I felt I still held some authority, the one domain where my experience could still measure yours. It was my last, pathetic attempt to feel relevant in the magnificent story of your life. I wanted you to need my advice. I wanted to feel that I still had something to offer you. In trying to cling to you, I only pushed you away. My pride would never let me admit this to you while I drew breath. I am so sorry, my darling girl. I was not disappointed in you. I was afraid of being forgotten by you." My voice broke on the last sentence. A hot tear escaped and traced a path through the rainwater on my cheek. I could not look at them. I stared at the letter, the words blurring. "She was not disappointed in me," I whispered, the revelation still fresh and raw. "She was afraid, and I have done the exact same thing to you." I finally forced myself to lift my gaze to Marcus and Kiana. Marcus's defensive posture had melted away. He was staring at me, his book forgotten on the floor, his expression one of stunned realization. Kiana had her hand over her mouth, her eyes brimming with tears. "All this time," I continued, my voice thick with emotion, "I thought I was honoring her memory by wanting for you what I believed she wanted for me. A legacy. A continuation. But I was not. I was repeating her fear. My desire for grandchildren was never really about you or about a child. It was a proxy for my own terror. David is gone. My career, which once defined me, is winding down. I looked at the two of you, so vibrant, so in love, building your future, and I saw myself being left behind. I saw my own mother staring back at me from the shadows, and I became her. I tried to insert myself into your story because I was afraid that my own story was over. I was afraid of being forgotten." The confession hung in the air, stark and naked. I had laid my soul bare, and the silence that followed was terrifying. Then Marcus made a small, choked sound. He stood up, his own eyes glistening, and in 2 strides he was beside my chair. He did not say a word. He simply knelt down and wrapped his arms around me, pulling my head to his shoulder. It was the first real embrace we had shared in years. The dam inside me broke. I clung to him, sobbing into the familiar scent of his sweater, all the years of tension and misunderstanding dissolving in that flood of tears. I felt a hand on my back and looked up to see Kiana kneeling beside us, her own tears flowing freely as she joined the embrace. We stayed like that for a long time, a tangled knot of forgiveness on the floor, the rain tapping against the windows a gentle accompaniment to our tears. It was not a happy ending, it was a beginning. A new foundation, cracked and imperfect, but honest. When we finally pulled apart, sniffing and wiping our eyes, a kind of peaceful exhaustion settled over us. Marcus helped me back into the chair, and Kiana went to fetch a box of tissues. "I do not expect anything to change overnight," I said, my voice hoarse. "And I will never bring up the subject of children again. That decision is yours and yours alone. I needed you to know that I see you now. Not as characters in my story, but as the authors of your own." Marcus took my hand, his grip firm and warm. "We know, Mom, we know." We talked for a little while longer, the conversation easier, lighter, as if a poison had been drained from the room. It was time to go. I felt drained but lighter than I had in a decade. As I stood to leave, Kiana walked me to the door while Marcus went to find my coat. At the door, Kiana hesitated, then she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Olivia, what you said, it means more than you know, but there is something you should understand too. Our decision is not just about careers or freedom." She glanced back toward the living room, and a shadow passed over her face, a flicker of something deep and painful I had been too self-absorbed to notice before. "It is also medical. It is something we have been dealing with for a while now." She stopped as if she had said too much. My heart, which had just begun to mend, gave a painful lurch. The porch light illuminated the fresh worry in her eyes, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the journey to true understanding had only just begun.